This is Hartfield Cricket Club, and I don't think that A.A. Milne had a lot to do with the club, but I believe he was sort of involved when they were here on their holidays at weekends. And anyway, so a typical nice little village club. It all looks pretty good, except that the fact that the pavilion here, they're obviously doing some work on it because it's not being used at all. It's completely empty, and as I say, it looks like they've just done a refurb or doing a refurb on it. So it's not in operation at the moment, but yeah, it looks in nice condition. It's really dried out because we've got this drought on at the moment, so it's really dry. There's the wicket. So as I say, I'm not sure how much Milne actually had to do with it, but he certainly was involved. And Milne, he was quite a keen cricketer. He was a good fielder, apparently, and in London he played for a team called the Authors 11, and it included some illustrious names and that, because you had Jerome K. Jerome, you had Arthur Conan Doyle of Sherlock Holmes fame. He was a good cricketer, apparently. And you had P.G. Woodhouse and a group of others who I don't know that well. And of course himself, Milne. And so that was the Authors 11 he played for. And J.M. Barrie as well, of Peter Pan fame. He also was one of the players at various times. Anyway, that was before the First World War. They all played, and they all played together. And of course, they involved in the war and that. And after the war, when they all came out, it was never revived. And I think you can understand they'd been through the war, they were a bit older, and I think probably the war had affected them, and games and that were not quite so important. Anyway, it was never revived afterwards. So there we are, that's Milne's association with cricket, and this is Hartfield Cricket Club. Well, this is Cochford Lane, just off the main road there. It's just outside of Hartfield, and Cochford Farm is just down here on the left, but it's off the road, so you can't actually see it. There's just the sign to it. And yeah, some very nice houses round here. And this is where Christopher Robin grew up. This is where they had their family holidays. This was their country house. Of course, Cochford Farm is not just famous for being where Christopher Robin lived and the Milnes and the origins of Winnie the Pooh, because in the 1960s it was bought by Brian Jones he was the one who started the Rolling Stones with Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, and he bought Cochford Farm and he lived there, and it was really, I think, to get away from the hubbub of the rock and roll lifestyle and peace and quiet. And he had a problem with drink and drugs, to the point that he became very unreliable in the band. And I think it was 1968. Keith Richards and Jagger, they went to see him and told him that he was out of the band because he had become so unreliable. And I think that was I forget exactly the timings, but I think that was about June. I know it was only a month later that Brian Jones was found drowned in his swimming pool, and it seems that it was a misadventure of drugs and alcohol and what have you, and that was at Cochford Farm. So there's a bit more to Cochford Farm, as I say, than just Winnie the Pooh and the Milnes. And there's always been a controversy as to what the whole story was about, and there's lots of conspiracy theories about it. But anyway, that's what happened. Brian Jones found drowned one day in his swimming pool, and I think that was 1968. So there we are. There's another little facet to the story of Cochford Farm. So here we are, approaching the bridge where Winnie the Pooh and Piglet played Pooh Sticks. So we're in a bit of a drought at the moment. We've had some really hot weather this summer. So I don't think the water's flowing at all at the moment by the look of it. Oh yes, it is a bit. You can see it just there. But it's very slow. There we are, Pooh Bridge. And if we come up here, I believe we will find something just along on the left. It's so peaceful just coming through here. You can see why Milne loved this. Living in London, being able to come down here, walk in the country, do his writing. Right, just here. I don't know what you can see. This is Pooh's house. So people have left honey jars. We better just close that up. Not quite sure how it stops. There we go. Right. Well, just have a look in his door. There we go. That's the Disney version. I don't get the impression that Christopher Robin ever had a very close relationship with his mother. I think his mother was quite typical of the period, the Edwardians. I think the children were to be seen and not heard, as I say. And as I say, I don't think they had a particularly close relationship, and I don't think his mother could cope too much with crying or that. I think it was very much of a situation of no blubbing, and I think that applied to pretty much anyone. So quite a bit tough. And within the family, Christopher was called Billy Moon, and Billy was a nickname that he had, and Moon was apparently, when he was very young, his interpretation of how to pronounce Milne. So he was known within the family that he was known as Billy Moon. So we might as well do the sights while we're here. This is Piglet's house. And not far away, just up here, this of course is Owl's house, where you'd expect it to be, up in the tree. Well, I think that's all the houses there are. There's some other places that we'll see as we go further up. So we've done the sites down by the house. We've been down in Cochford Lane, where the house is, where they lived, and we've done the bits around Pooh Sticks Bridge, and we've seen the houses as they are. And what I've done now, I've come further north, and I'm headed up to the high points. And what we're going to do, we're going to end up at the enchanted place where Milne ended the books. So Milne, what I want to do is to try and have a look at the character of Milne and the relationship which he had with Christopher Robin, and the relationship there was with the stories and Winnie the Pooh. So Milne, he had become a successful author, writer. He worked for Punch magazine. He was a writer for Punch, and then he became the assistant editor of Punch. And then, of course, that was prior to the First World War. He got married, I think, in 1913. So that was all prior to the First World War. He went through the First World War. He was a lieutenant, and he was at the Battle of the Somme. He got wounded and sent home. And then he worked for British intelligence in the second half of the war, 1917-18. And then he came out of the army, was whatever they call it, demobbed or whatever, in 1919. And then he left the army in 1920. And it was in 1920 that Christopher Robin came along. And Christopher Robin was an only child. I've had a bit of a rest, so I'm going to carry on because it's getting warm all the time here. So he was an only child, and apparently he put it down himself to the fact that he was an only child because he had been a long time coming. But of course you'd had the First World War, and things had got in the way. But he remained an only child. So there you got a young chap come out of the army and been through the First World War, like lots of them. And he's making his life again. And he wanted to be he was a playwright. He wanted to be a serious author. And as I say, he was a playwright, and he was successful. So in 1925, he bought Cochford Farm, and that was so that he would have somewhere to write, because they lived in London, and somewhere where he'd have a bit of peace and quiet. And so that's why he bought it. And Christopher Robin would have been sort of 5 at the time. So they used to go for walks out here. That's why I've come out here to show you. We've walked up, you see, and I've been walking for a little while up, and it's just a steady incline up, but you can see this is beautiful. So this is what Christopher Robin said about as he grew up, that it was great. They had this place where they would go for weekends, holidays, spend the summer holidays here, and great. And he would have this to roam in, and amazing for a small boy. Not dissimilar my own upbringing from the age of 9, we lived in Netley Marsh in the New Forest. And this was really, from the age of 9, this is very similar to what my childhood was like. Just going off up into the fields with a friend, and that's what it was like. So this was where Christopher Robin spent his young childhood. So he would come out for walks with his dad, and his dad would tell him stories. He had these toys. So he had Winnie the Pooh. That was a teddy bear given to him for his first birthday when he was 1, funnily enough. What I was going to say, it was 1921, and so that's how he got Winnie the Pooh, and he called him Edward. So he was Edward Bear originally, but there was a bear, a black bear, I think, a Canadian black bear, and he'd been, in the First World War, he'd been a mascot for an army unit, Canadian army unit, and he was an amiable bear, which I presume is what you would choose if you wanted it to be a mascot. So he was easy to get on with, and they left him at London Zoo, where he was looked after, and he was a great hit with the kids apparently, which you can imagine. And when Christopher Robin went to London Zoo, he was very taken with this bear. Was called Winnie Peg. I might have already mentioned that, and he was called Winnie. So that was where Winnie came from, in Winnie the Pooh, and the Pooh was something to do with a swan or something that Christopher Robin had come across. I don't know the details about that. Not sure that I want to. So that's how the bear became called Winnie the Pooh, the teddy bear. So that was the teddy bear, Winnie the Pooh. So he came about, and then you had Piglet. He came along. He was a present some point. Eeyore, I think he came along a year later, and so who we got? We got Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, Eeyore, Kangaroo and Roo were real toys, and I think that's it. And then there's Rabbit and Owl, and there weren't toys of them, and Milne made them up. So that's the toys. So makes you puff a bit. This just become a little bit steeper here. So Milne told Christopher Robin these stories about these toys, and that's where the books came from. So he wrote them down. They were published. He wrote some poems as well, and they got published in Punch magazine. But then in 1926, they moved here, 1925, that's it. 1926, boy, it really does make you puff. Trouble is, it's really hot here. I'll pick it up at the top. So 1926, the book was published, Winnie the Pooh, and instant success. Again, you can understand the time. War was over. People were looking for something to be a bit cheerful about, and that. All these kids coming along. So instant success. And then he wrote another one in 1928, and that was The House at Pooh Corner. Great little stories. You can see why they're popular. I was brought up on them. So were my two daughters. I read them Winnie the Pooh stories when they were little. They always used to like, I think it was when they tried to find the heffalump, where they tried to set a trap for a heffalump, which we will have a look at a little bit later. And they used to like that story. I've just stood in this bit of shade because it is getting ridiculously hot again. We've had a lot of these heat waves this year. It's not right. This is England. Where's the wet and rain? It's the school holidays as well, and it still hasn't broken up. It usually rains when the kids go on holiday. There we are. So that was the 2 books Milne wrote, and he stopped then. He finished the stories at the end of House at Pooh Corner. He finished them, and I'm just almost at the point where the books end, which I'm going to show in a minute when we get there. And so that was it. And what he used to do, as I say, they were immensely successful. So he used to go around to book signings, and he used to always take Christopher Robin with him. That great marketing ploy, and it made a lot of money, of course. The only problem, now we're going to have a think about Christopher Robin. You see the effect that this had on Christopher Robin. He said in later times he did like his childhood here, which you can sort of imagine, and he just had the freedom, which, as I say, is pretty much like my childhood was from the age of 9, well, and before, but where you could just go off and you could roam and really do your own thing with some friends. And so he did enjoy this time. And he said he quite liked being famous. He liked sort of going round. But what he did hold against his parents was that they didn't prepare him for this fame, and for also what would happen when he got to school. You see, and of course, I mean, he went to school, to boarding school, from the age of 9, which seems a bit odd to us now. But of course, we're going back. These are parents brought up in Victorian times. These are Edwardian parents, and especially the sort of upper moneyed classes, and that very, very strict. Children were to be seen, not heard. Nanny looked after the children. Christopher Robin had a nanny whose name was Violet Rand, I believe. She is Alice. If you ever hear the poem, the Changing Guard, the guard at Buckingham Palace, Changing Guard at Buckingham Palace, Christopher Robin went there with Alice. Olive Rand is Alice. That is who Alice was, and she was his nanny, and she was, of course, just with him all the time. Apart from her, he said, apart from the 2 weeks that she had holiday every September, she was virtually with him the entire time. So different relationships, and that's in those days. And that's what it was like. As I say, they were Edwardian parents and that. So the problem was he was sent off to boarding school at 9, and he was seriously bullied at boarding school because, of course, the books were famous. He was famous, him saying his prayers, and that was all very famous. And so he was bullied a lot by the older boys, well, just the boys at the school. And of course, there's no getting away from it when you're at boarding school. So he came to really dislike the books. That he came to dislike that, and he had an on-off relationship with his parents. It wasn't too bad with his dad apparently when he was a teenager, but then they were pretty well estranged. But his mum is very much estranged from his mum, and even on her deathbed she wouldn't see him. So that was a shame. But that is what happens in families. So Christopher Robin completed his education. He went to Cambridge. He studied mathematics. He went on I don't know for the maths scholarship. Well, that might be his dad I'm thinking about anyway. So here we are, just approaching the Heffalump Trap. If you've got small children, read them the story of how Pooh gets the honey jar stuck on his head, and Piglet thinks he's the Heffalump that they've captured. So here we are. This is the Heffalump Trap. And as I say, when I came down yesterday, there was a young German family here, and the dad was sat just here reading the story to his little boy. And I think this is the Lone Pine. So there we go. The Heffalump Trap. And that's in Winnie the Pooh. Now I've just stopped on the path here. You can see here the sand. I mean, if it is sand, it's very, very fine. So presumably this is the stuff that Roo learned to jump in. So that's how it is there, just to demonstrate. I think this is the nearest I'm probably going to get to the sand pits where Roo learned to jump. So of course I haven't mentioned, excuse me, I haven't mentioned so far about E.H. Shepard, Ernest Shepard, who was the illustrator who illustrated the books. And he was well known to Milne, A.A. Milne, because Milne worked for Punch and Shepard worked for Punch as well. He was one of the illustrators. And they went through the First World War, not together, but they were both in the First World War. And so that's the thing. So when Milne was doing the books, he asked Shepard to illustrate them, which he did. So Shepard came out here and he drew the illustrations actually from the scenery all around here. That's why it's so familiar, that's the thing. And the thing is, of course, so Winnie the Pooh wasn't Winnie the Pooh at all. The bear was Edward Bear originally. He became called Winnie the Pooh, so that's the thing. So the bear in the book is Winnie the Pooh, but the actual drawing of the bear is not the bear Winnie the Pooh. It's Ernest Shepard's little boy, his bear Growler, and it was Growler who was used as the model for the illustrations in the book. So the Winnie the Pooh in the book isn't Winnie the Pooh at all, and of course Winnie the Pooh isn't actually the bear. That was actually Edward Bear originally. So there we are, just to add a bit of confusion on that to it. So here I am. Here we're going to draw this to a conclusion now, and this is the enchanted place. So at the end, Milne wanted to end the books. The inspiration for the books was his little boy telling him stories, and that had come to an end because Christopher Robin was going to school. So 1928, and he brought out the second book, and he brought it to a conclusion. So Winnie the Pooh was brought to a conclusion, and he ended it where in the last chapter, the animals know that Christopher Robin is going away, but they have no idea of the details, and they don't know why, but they know that Christopher Robin is going away. So that's what the last chapter is about, and it's called The Enchanted Place. And at the end of the book, it's just Winnie the Pooh and Christopher Robin, and they walk and they come to the top, up to the high ground, where they're looking down over the 100-acre wood. And so this is called They Came to the Enchanted Place, and it's here that Winnie the Pooh that Christopher Robin tried to explain to Winnie the Pooh that he was going away, and of course he was going to school, and he would be at boarding school, so he'd only be home in the holidays and that. So he was trying to explain that things would change, and that he would be going away. I'll just let this plane go over. So Christopher Robin explains to Pooh that he won't be doing nothing anymore, and they discussed about nothing, and Pooh wants to know what doing nothing is. So Christopher Robin says, oh well, it's like when you're just going to do something and your mum says to you, oh, what are you doing, where are you going, and you say, oh, nothing, and then you go and do nothing. And so Christopher Robin is explaining to Pooh that he's not going to do nothing anymore. And I've got here, this is a first edition, The House at Pooh Corner, where this is in. So I thought it'd be a good idea just to finish this off by just reading through this, and it'll be easier if I had my proper glasses on. And this is how Milne finished the books. This is from The Enchanted Place. Suddenly, again, Christopher Robin, who was still looking at the world with his chin in his hands, called out, Pooh? Yes, said Pooh. When Pooh? Yes, Christopher Robin. I'm not going to do nothing any more. Never again? Well, not so much. They don't let you. Pooh waited for him to go on, but he was silent again. Yes, Christopher Robin, said Pooh helpfully. Pooh, when I'm not doing nothing, will you come up here sometimes? Just me? Yes, Pooh. Will you be here too? Yes, Pooh, I will be, really, I promise. I will be, Pooh. That's good, said Pooh. Pooh, promise you won't forget about me. Ever. Not even when I'm 100. I will turn the page. Pooh thought for a little. How old shall I be then? 99, Pooh nodded. I promise, he said. Still with his eyes on the world, Christopher Robin put a hand and felt for Pooh's paw. Pooh, said Christopher Robin earnestly, if I'm not quite... He stopped and tried again. Pooh, whatever happens, you will understand, won't you? Understand what? Oh, nothing. He laughed and jumped to his feet. Come on. Where? Said Pooh. Anywhere, said Christopher Robin. And so off they went together. But to wherever they go, and whatever happens to them on the way, in that enchanted place, on the top of the forest, a little boy and his bear will always be playing. So I find this a very emotional place because Milne encapsulated the transition from being a little boy, the carefree life of a little boy, and growing up, going to school, and going on into adulthood. Something that we all did. And somehow just to stand in a place like this, where you actually have that transition and those stories. And a lot of us can remember childhoods very much like this. If only every child could have a childhood like this. And deep down inside every man, there is that frightened little boy.